Hi. Our lesson today is when God comes to Abraham and gives him the covenant of circumcision. Although other cultures around Abraham certainly had circumcision, it was a rite of passage from puberty to adulthood, not a religious covenant between them and God. So Abraham, he's been in Canaan now about 25 years. At least he's been called by God for that long. And he still doesn't have an heir, except for Ishmael. Everyone believes that Ishmael will be his heir, including Abraham. And at this point, after giving Abraham this covenant of circumcision, God says to him, "And I will bless Sarah." And he then tells Abraham that Sarah will be the mother of the child of promise. And there will be born unto Sarah and Abraham a son. They are to name Isaac. Abraham's reaction is pretty typical. He falls down on the ground laughing. And he says to himself, "Can a man as old as I am and a woman like Sarah, 90 years old, as we would say postmenopausal, can we have a child?" And God says Sarah will be the mother of the child of promise. The story picks up again when three strangers visit Sarah and Abraham at their camp. And Abraham, as usual, offers great hospitality to them. And at the end of the meal, they ask him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And Abraham says, "She's in the tent." And then one of the strangers, the Lord, says, "This time next year I will return, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah, of course, overhears, and to herself she laughs and says, "How can a woman as old as I am, postmenopausal, and a man like Abraham as old as he is, how can we have a child?" But God says, "Honestly, Sarah, it's going to happen." And why did Sarah laugh? He asks, Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? And Sarah says, "I didn't laugh." She's frightened. And at this point, she must have realized that this was no ordinary stranger. It was the Lord. He had read her mind. But it's interesting what he says then to Abraham. He says, "Why did Sarah say she's too old to have a child?" Honestly, he left out the part where she said that Abraham was too old too. Maybe he didn't want to insult Abraham by having Sarah say that Abraham probably was not able to get with the program. That's a nice way to put it. But so he leaves that out. We really don't know. But we do know that just a year later, when he returns, there is a child. There is Isaac, a beautiful child of promise. And this time there is laughter of joy, of happiness, not of sorrow, not of bitterness. In fact, I don't think Sarah laughed that way the first time. She laughed in unbelief just as Abraham had, and God wasn't put off by it. In fact, I think it kind of turned his head like this, and he laughed, and he said, "Yeah, you did laugh, Sarah, but you know what? It's okay. You don't have to be frightened. You will have that son." And so a year later, she did. And she is so joyful. And she says to all around her, "Now you can laugh with me with joy, not at me," right? And they are thrilled. The birth of a son no one thought possible. And this message tells us that don't ever give up. Ever, never. God can do wondrous things. Do you know that when that question that God had asked too, is anything too hard for God? It actually, the word hard there means wondrous. Is anything too wondrous for God to do? And the answer, of course, is no. And now Sarah knows that, and we can too. So as we go into the end of this particular series on Abraham, we're going to have the same song we had in 2013 when we covered this. Imagine Sarah, a mother at 90 years old, holding her infant son in her arms the very first evening after his birth and singing him to sleep with a lullaby. God bless you and have a wonderful week.